Hello out there in fantasy football land. This is my BFL 30 for 30 video. I brought some props to inspire me. I'm wearing one of the jerseys from one of my championships, one of my two, and there's one over here, both from each one from one of my favorite teams, the Bucks from '04. This is Sasha. And the Oilers, Houston Oilers, who no longer exist. That's still my favorite team, one of my favorite teams. I have my trusty BFFL March Madness trophy, which I'm assuming I get to keep another year since we didn't have March Madness this year. And I know my wife, Doris, is thrilled with that prospect since we leave it on the dining room table, even when guests come over and we have fancy dinners. And I just know that she is really thrilled about that prospect. Actually, we don't always leave it here on the table. Sometimes I take it upstairs to bed with me and put it on the nightstand. The puzzle pieces you see here have nothing to do with fantasy football. We put this puzzle out at the beginning of March when the virus started, and you can tell how much progress we've made. We're going to get around to that. I think we'll have plenty of time to do it. So I wanted to, in my video, talk about three people who are no longer with us, but had an impact on the BFFL. First person I want to talk about is Frank DeCesare. Frank, I went to high school with, Jimmy and I went to high school with. And one funny story I remember about him is that the Florida team always had a tough time beating Georgia in the flag football game. And one year I said to Frank, I'm like, Frank, we just got to find some way to put us over the top. You know, what we really need is a ringer. And he said, well, who's qualified to play in that game? And I said, well, owners and relatives, I guess. And he said, well, my son's a pretty good athlete. And I didn't realize at the time how good an athlete. He ended up being one of the top 3 decathletes in the world, Olympics and everything, Trey Hardy. And so we brought Trey over as a co-owner. And well, needless to say, we won that year. Trey could jump and run like the wind, and it was quite a good year for the Florida team. And I also think Frank, actually, come to think of it, he caught the winning pass in the first Florida victory, I think a couple years before Trey arrived. So that was, I have fond memories of Frank, and he loved doing the fantasy football with Jimmy. I also want to talk about Mark Benware. Mark, I went to college with and roomed with for many years. And the story about Mark that I like is one year he was designated as a co-owner for the Fusion with Jim Stefanik. So I went to pick up Mark at the airport a couple of days before the draft, was in Atlanta. And Mark had, I swear, he had a briefcase, and I'd never seen Mark with a briefcase before. And I said, Mark, what's in the briefcase? What's up? He's like, oh, that's all Jim's draft picks. And I said, you have it in a briefcase? He's like, well, I have to keep it safe and I have to keep it secret. I'm like, secret from who? He said, well, from you guys, everybody else in the league. I'm like, you're going to keep it a secret from me? I've known you for 15 years. You barely even know Jim. He's like, psycho? I stand true to my word, and I promised him I would not let anybody see this. He said, also, in case some of the picks that he wanted were already taken, he has a system, and I can't tell you what the system is either. So, needless to say, for some reason, you know, the whole reason Mark was doing this was because Jim was in some far off country and couldn't be at the draft, and so. By the way, is Jim like a spy or something? It seems like he's always in Abu Dhabi or Istanbul, or what's up with that, Jim? Anyway, so Mark did the draft, and I'm pretty sure Jim won, like he won most of the years, those early years. And Mark was also probably our best fantasy hockey player. We had a short-lived fantasy hockey team, and he knew his hockey. He knew his football too, but he really knew his hockey. And the last person I want to talk about is Caroline. Caroline, back in the old days, back in the way old days, the way we did a draft was we did it several ways, but one of the ways we did it is we would write our pick down on a piece of paper, and we would have, either we would walk up or we'd have a runner take a piece of paper up to Caroline, and she would announce the pick. It's the Andre Reed, Buffalo Bills, Psycho Killers, for example. Well, near the end of the drafts, as you guys know, pickings are pretty slim. And when you're trying to pick your 7th running back or your 8th wide receiver, there's really not a whole lot to choose from. And chances are you're never going to see a down anyway. So I thought it would be fun to spice it up a little bit. And I started looking for the hardest names to pronounce in the NFL just to see how Caroline would handle it. How would she manage to pronounce these names? And so that was always kind of a fun thing for me to do, and she enjoyed it too. And I noticed after 3 or 4 years of this, I couldn't really trick her anymore. She had a hard time those first few years with the names I came up with, but after a while, I couldn't trick her anymore. And I'm like, I took her aside one time and I said, Caroline, how is it that you got so much better at this? I can't trick you anymore in these names. She goes, I study now. I studied the hardest names that I can find, knowing that you're going to give me a name like that. So, anyway, good times. I miss them all, and they had a definite impact on the BFFL. While I was talking, I was thinking that possibly one of the first Florida football games that we beat Georgia, it was a small version, and I think it was me and Christopher for Florida, and Wayne and I think Bobby for the Georgia team. And we were in the parking lot of Barnacle Bills up in North Atlanta, and we just decided to do just a quick game just for the heck of it. So I won't go through the whole game, but it was tied, and we decided the next touchdown was going to win. And Christopher was quarterback, I was a wide receiver. I went out, and Christopher threw a pass to me, a long pass, and it hit a tree. It hit a branch of a tree. Well, Wayne, who was covering me, for some reason, Wayne, you gave up on the play, and when the ball hit the branch, it fell straight down. I caught it, ran in for a touchdown. Florida wins. We won. I think that was our first win. Now, Wayne will say he brought out a rule book from the NFL and said, here, it specifically says in item number 7.2 dot, whatever the version of the rule was, something along the lines that a ball cannot hit an impediment and still be in play. But here's the thing, Wayne, and I'm sorry you're not here to defend yourself, but here's the deal. For years, the BFFL has tried to model themselves as much as possible to the NFL. But here's the thing. We're not the NFL. So that rule that you found doesn't apply. We win. Wayne, sorry about that. However, to Wayne's credit, one of my greatest memories was when we had our fantasy football junket out in San Francisco. And I don't know how he did it, but Wayne managed to get us into my favorite baseball stadium, AT&T Park. I don't know what it's called now, but it was AT&T Park then for the San Francisco Giants. And I just was in heaven. Here are the 10 of us. We have the whole stadium to ourselves. I still think about that. We went out to the left field where they had that mitt. If you know baseball, you've seen that mitt in left field. They have slides out there for kids. I didn't know they had slides out there. You can't see that on TV. We went down the slides. Oh, we had the greatest time. So, Wayne, good job, brother. let's see, another memory I have, funny memory, is of another one about the Florida-Georgia football game. One of the first years that Frank Mordalis came up, he was kind of testing to see if this is a group that he'd want to be part of, to hang around for a few days every year. And we made him referee of the Florida-Georgia football game. Now, this was back when Jim Stefanik and Eddie Kozak almost every year had a fight. And this year that Frank was the referee was no different. Jim and Eddie got into it, not necessarily a fist fight, but close to it. And at one point, Jim and Eddie were both yelling at the top of their lungs at Frank as the referee to throw a penalty on the other guy. And I mean, they were going at it. Finally, after about 5 minutes of this, Frank said, you know, I didn't sign up for this. I quit. I don't want to do this anymore. Poor Frank, one of the nicest guys in the world, and they're both yelling their heads off at him. Let's see, what else do I got here? I think that might be, okay, I'll do one on me. In the second year, back before we had all these fancy computer programs and you could look at, ESPN the morning of, now you know exactly what's going on with every single player right up to the minute of the draft. Back then, you had, yesterday's USA Today that gave you as good a list as possible, but it wasn't anything like what we have now. So, it comes to my pick, and I think it's my second pick in the draft, which is a pretty important pick, obviously. And I pick Ruben Mays. And I hear from across the room, at this point, young Matt Vickery say, oh, he's retired. I'm like, retired? He's like, yeah, he retired. He retired 2 weeks ago. I'm like, not hurt, not suspended, but retired. My number 2 pick. And Christopher, after that, started an award called the Ruben Mays Award that was given to the worst pick in the draft, which I think actually that award got retired pretty quickly because it seemed like an impossible task for anybody to live up to how bad that pick was. So I think they just retired it in my name. So anyway, that's my video. Thank you to my cinematographer, Doris, my lovely wife. And we will see you hopefully somewhere in Tampa in draft weekend. Bye-bye.